Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Dan, Warpaint JKU, and this is the unedited and off-camber video series where we talk about things that are basically just casual talks. I get asked a lot of questions over on my Instagram page at Warpaint JKU and here in the comments and out on the street at local off-road parks. And one thing that always comes up for people that don't have 1 tons and are thinking about it is they want to know if the investment is really worth it, if the juice is worth the squeeze, right? Everybody talks about the pros of having 1 tons, and there are a number of them. No one ever talks about the cons, right? They're kind of unexpected when people spend all the money or don't spend a lot of money and spend all the time building them, install them, and then didn't realize what those cons were. So I'm here to tell you about them. Check it out. Okay guys, so obviously I'm a 1 ton guy. You know, Warpaint in the background over there has a 14 bolt and a Super Duty Dana 60. We're currently working on Project Maple Leaf, which is getting a 14 bolt and a Super Duty Dana 60. I like 1 tons. With that said, I have a Dana 30 over there under the cabinet, and 1 tons definitely aren't for every build, okay? Now, as I said a minute ago, there are a lot of pros for doing 1 tons, okay? Reliability, strength, things like that. All the things that we currently know about. The weight under the vehicle lowers the center of gravity. It makes you more stable, the width, things like that. But what are the cons? There are a number of them, so let's dive right in and talk about it. So the first con that I want to talk about, and it's probably the biggest one that maybe is the most obvious and it's on everyone's mind, is cost, okay? Now, 1 tons can be expensive, especially if you buy them from a company that are pre-made and ready to bolt in your rig. Usually you can go through and select your width. You can select your lockers that you want to run. You can select what ball joints you want to run, things like that. And at that point, you're just buying the axles. They're also super heavy, so you have to pay to have them shipped, plus tax, plus you're going to need new drive shafts, plus you're going to need new wheels and tires. So you're really realistically looking at about, if you go that store-bought route, you're looking at this time of making this video, probably at about 25 grand by the time you're done just to stick 1 ton axles under your rig. Now, guys, that's a chunk of change. That's a lot of money, right? Anybody that tells you, oh, it's not that bad, they're lying to you if they bought them from the store, okay? There's a number of guys out there on the internet that also like to say how they built their Jeep and they bought it, right? They actually didn't really build anything. They may not have even installed the axles in it. But that can definitely make it expensive. Now, a way that you can soften the blow on the cost is to build junkyard axles. And I mentioned it a minute ago, but that Project Maple Leaf build is going to show you how to do the re-gear. It's going to show you how it can actually be affordable. And then when you take the axles that are currently under your Jeep, your old wheels and tires, and you sell them, you can recoup a lot of the cost. Now, that's the same if you were to buy the store-bought axles. You would still be recouping some of the cost, but the store-bought axles are so much more expensive than building them yourself that by the time you recoup some of that cost, you're still spending a ton of money out of pocket. Okay, so if you're on a budget and you still want the 1 ton axles, it is doable with some planning, with some saving, especially if you can turn a wrench and you know how to weld. If you don't know how to weld, you can have a buddy come over that does know how to weld, or you can learn how to weld. It's not all that difficult. There's tons of videos out there showing you how to do it. You know, a little bit of practice and you can get to the point where you can definitely build 1 ton axles. But make sure you know what you're doing because, you know, your life and other people's lives on the road definitely depend on it. Now, one of the other cons that people sometimes also talk about as a pro is the weight, okay? 1 ton axles are heavy. And while that can be an advantage, right? When you, like we said a minute ago, you lower your center of gravity. All that weight underneath your springs does lower the center of gravity and makes you more stable, okay? But it also does some unfortunately inefficient things to your rig, okay? It's gonna make your rig feel less powerful. all right? All that added weight, it kind of feels like you're towing a trailer all the time. So it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? And again, you kind of have to just weigh the pros and the cons with what you're truly using your rig for. And that, again, is where sometimes those store-bought axles, the ones that are already pre-made to bolt into your Jeep, they're going to be a little bit lighter by a few hundred pounds. So if you're truly daily driving it, commuting back and forth to work, things like that, you might want to pick up a set of store-bought axles because they are going to be just a little bit lighter. But aside from making your Jeep feel less powerful, they're also going to affect your fuel rating, right? Now, again, no one builds a Jeep like that for good gas mileage, okay? And it's not bad, right? With the 3.6 liter in that and the automatic 5-speed, I get about 16 around town. On the highway, it's a little worse because obviously it's not aerodynamic at all. And now it's even worse with the tires sticking out. But, you know, it does decrease your fuel economy, okay? So the weight, the other thing I forgot about, right? Unedited video is your tire wear, okay? Believe it or not, because the axles are so heavy and you're gonna run mud tires. No one puts axles on their rig like that and runs a street tire. So when you run mud tires, the rubber compound is a lot softer, and the weight of those axles, especially if you're turning, like pulling into parking spots and things like that, it just mashes that rubber into the pavement, and you're definitely gonna wear your... Now, one of the other negatives, which happens to also be a positive, right? It's a pro and a con situation, truly, with this ton swap, is the width, okay? Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. You're like, yeah, but that's a factory axle for a pickup truck, right? And they're not too wide to drive on the street, and they're not. But in a Jeep, okay, the width, if you walk with me for a second, I can better show you. The width of the axle is a lot wider, okay? And then a pickup truck, because you're also gonna put an offset wheel on there to kick the tire out so you can clear everything when you're turning, as well as clear your high steer arm so your inner sidewall is not rubbing on it. So with that weight, you can see here, the tire's a lot wider, right, than the front of the Jeep. And because the hood kind of gets wider as it goes back toward the windshield, when you're sitting inside the rig, it's really hard to know where that tire is when you're pulling into a parking spot. Because if you look at that front tire over there, when I turn to the right, the front corner of that front tire really sticks pretty far out there. And when you guys are turning into parking spots and things like that, that tire's way out there and you could definitely hit the car next to you. Now, with width also comes a decreased turning radius, okay? You're not gonna be able to turn as tight as you did with narrower axles. So it's just a give and take. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention about the turning radius, guys, is so a Super Duty Dana 60, okay? Because that's what I have on my rig, and that's what I have right here. The knuckles, when they turn on this front axle, will actually turn at a greater angle than they do on the factory Dana 44 or Dana 30. So you would think you'd have a better turning radius, but you gotta remember, you're still hooking that up to a steering box made for a JK. And that steering box, that sector shaft that comes out, that's hooked up to your steering, only turns so far. And it doesn't turn far enough to take full advantage of that maximum angle on that axle. It turns far enough to take advantage of the maximum angle on the factory axle that came in the Jeep. But when you swap to something like that, thinking you're gonna have more turning angle, you actually have the same turning angle that you had with the Dana 44 and the Dana 30, but now you're wider. So it doesn't make as nice of turns. To be honest with you, that rig right there, now I have a work vehicle. I don't truly drive it every day, but my kids don't go in my work vehicle, and I don't use my work vehicle for personal use. So when I have to run to the grocery store, or I have to pick my kids up from school, or I gotta run through a drive-through on a Saturday afternoon, sometimes I can't actually turn around the corner of a building in a drive-through line and line myself up with the window. It becomes a 3-point turn situation. Not that big of a deal, right? It's something that you could deal with every day for the added reliability and all the benefits of a 1-ton axle. But if you're not gonna put a big tire on it and really go off-road, 1-ton axles probably are not for you. Guys, and in the effort of making this video one of the shorter and sweeter ones, the last con that I really want to talk about is tires, okay? When you go with an axle that big, because the differential, right, and the center section is so much bigger than a Dana 44 or a Dana 30, you wind up really committing yourself to a larger tire, because in order to have decent ground clearance under that big diff, yes, there's shave kits and things like that. And you can see that axle is actually shaved. This axle is actually shaved. But even with that shave kit, in order to have decent ground clearance, you really need to go with a 40. Very few people run 37s on axles like that, and there really isn't a need. With some much cheaper modifications to your factory axle, they can support a 37-inch tire, usually just fine. But when you commit yourself to a larger tire, now those tires truly are more expensive. There are very few ways to actually find deals on tires, especially a tire like that. Most of you probably have no idea. So hopefully this teaches you. But big companies, big tire companies like Discount Tire, they have the best prices around usually, unless you catch like an oddball sale somewhere else. But they have the best prices around because they're wholesalers essentially, right? They buy so much volume, so many tires, that they can strike better deals with tire manufacturers and sell them for a cheaper price. Well, even a 40-inch tire, when you go to Discount Tire and ask them, right? Next time you're there, ask them. See how many tires they have in stock. I was just there a few weeks ago. They listed probably 20 different tires in a 40 by 1350 with a 17-inch rim. It's the most common rim size for a 40-inch tire. Of all those tires, the national inventory had a big, fat goose egg, a big 0 right next to every single one of them, but 3. And those 3 remaining tires were very expensive because there were only like 30 tires of each left in the country. 30 of each. You're gonna buy 5, right? There's a lot of rigs, maybe not in your hometown, but there's a lot of rigs on 40s rolling around this country. Think of Moab, think of Texas, think of Oklahoma, think of Windrock Park, think of all these off-road parks. There's a lot of rigs on 40s, and they all need tires at some point. And when there's only 30 left in the country, supply and demand, guys, right? Brings you back to like 4th grade. Supply and demand, okay? Number of them goes down, price starts to go up. Those tires are not cheap, okay? Now, some are a little cheaper than others, but that's only if you can get them in stock. And that's the hard part, is finding them all in stock. And you're kind of committing yourself to that. Because yeah, I could say, oh, there's no 40s available, I'm gonna drop to a 37, but then I'd have such little ground clearance that it's really not worth it, right? So just another con. Now guys, in review, okay, a lot of those cons also have pros on the flip side of the coin. I didn't really talk about too many of those pros. I didn't spend a lot of time on it because that information is everywhere and I don't want to beat a dead horse here. But with those cons in mind, I love the 1-ton axles. I really do. I know a lot of people buy them and they spend their money on them. So of course you're going to say they love them. You know me on this channel, I am only going to promote something that truly is worth it. And for me, for my uses in my life situation, 1-ton axles are worth it. I have a very heavy rig, okay? That rig is over 6,000 pounds, considerably over 6,000 pounds. I run really big tires. I rock crawl big stuff. And the 1-ton axles give me the reliability in order to do that and then still drive it home and pick my kids up from school and things like that. Dana 44s really are too small to run a big tire. I've talked about that in other videos. And honestly, caster angle, right? Something that we haven't talked about. The caster angle on a Super Duty axle, the Super Duty axle fixes that issue. The aftermarket axles fix that problem of not having enough caster angle. So guys, that's another benefit. The Jeep drives great. It doesn't turn all that well. I mean, it turns fine to like pull out of your side street at the stop sign, things like that. But the really tight turns where you're turning your steering wheel all the way to max to like get into a parking spot, right? Like we talked about, drive-through line, things like that. Parallel parking, Not gonna happen, okay? Because as soon as someone backs up to my front bumper and parks in the spot in front of me, I'm not gonna be able to do a 10-point turn to get out. The Jeep's just too wide, the tires stick out too far. When I turn the tires, they stick out even farther, and it doesn't turn all that well. So all these things are things that you need to think about if you're truly daily driving your Jeep and thinking about 1-ton axles. Guys, click that subscribe button. Make sure you give this video a like. Even drop a comment. Let me know if there's a con that I didn't mention that you've thought of or experienced. And I hope this video helps you if you're thinking about the 1-ton swap and you truly want to know everything there is to know about it. Tune in and check out the Project Maple Leaf video. I'm about to hop in and re-gear these suckers and be on the lookout for that.